My name is Don Morin, and I am the president of the Saginaw River Marine Historical Society. Thank you for tuning in to our YouTube channel, where you can find many of our lectures over the past few years. The speaker for this video is Jeff Letzkus. Jeff is a local retired ship captain who has piloted some of the most iconic ships on the Great Lakes. Hope you enjoy this presentation.
My parents were members here, and if it was good enough for them, it's good enough for me, and I'm glad to help out doing anything I can. So here's what we do. Yeah, pretty much that quick. But one thing you'll notice in the background here, there's not too many steel mills left. When I first started going up and down that river as a cadet in 1996, we were still servicing steel mills, dropping off coal, iron ore pellets. Now it's a bunch of scrap yards and staging areas for other industrial residue, I would say. At one point, South Chicago was the most dense industrial area in the United States, and now it's kind of this. This is the Manitowoc, ship I was captain of. We did a lot of work on there, hauled a lot of cargo, and it's not always a bright, beautiful, sunshiny day like that, going down the river, enjoying nice scenery. Another nice, beautiful day. Sometimes you let the mates drive the ship, as the bottom right corner you can see. Sometimes you don't when you're going into Manistee. Depends on how good of a mate they are, but typically no. Then it turns into this. You miss the bright, beautiful, sunshiny days. Everything freezes, you have frozen cargo belts, you have frozen winches, you have frozen ballast tanks, and you can't go anywhere. And the cook is out of lettuce. So you sit and you wait for a Coast Guard cutter to come and try to help you out, and then you wait for another one to come, and eventually you chug away at it, and you get moving. But as a captain, you keep in mind, everything's frozen, the decks are frozen, your crew could slip and fall, somebody could get hurt. So it's not all beautiful sunshiny days going down the river. Some days you have that. Then some days you have this, which is even worse. I believe this happened in a period of about 4 hours. And it was so cold, we were hugging the north shore of Lake Superior, and I went down, took a nap, and woke up, and when the sun popped up, I thought, well, we got some work to do today. Now, this is a problem that affects many different things here. You can have stability issues because you're going to take a list. You can affect, where you're going. So we made this decision to get the boat iced up based on the fact that we had good equipment to deal with it and we had a good crew to deal with it. The next day was going to be warm. We put hot water boilers on. The crew knocked that out before we got to the sulaks and tied up on the port side where all that ice was. So had we not had the proper equipment, the proper crew, we wouldn't have made it through the sulaks. Well, not that day anyway. Summertime can get kind of bad too. Here's a wave that cleared off a lot of the residue that was on our deck, which my crew often said I used quite a bit. This affects us kind of in equipment, getting washed, broken, bent. You keep that stuff in mind. You keep in mind, hey, what's this wave going to do to any hatches that are open? Is it going to contaminate any grain we have down there? Is it going to contaminate any oil pans or anything like that? So yeah, it's just not rough weather. It's rough everything and rough on all equipment and rough on the crew. And it's rough on the cook trying to make a salad who's out of lettuce. This is South Chicago again. This is what I see all the time. That bridge not opening because a train is coming and my neighbor's on the Amtrak going down to Chicago to have a great weekend. And here I am waiting for the train to get by, which they're always late and they never go up. But as you'll notice, more industry is not there. Open area, no barges, no ships. They've turned some of the area into a marina. Here's beautiful Manistee. You go into Manistee and everything usually works great. Everything works out great. You give the bridges nice advance notice. And then some old lady runs into the bridge with her car because she is watching the ship. And the car's wedged underneath the bridge and the bumper goes flying out in front of you. So now you have to stop and figure out, can I make it? Can I not make it? The bridge tender's calling, can you make it? Should I go down? What should we do? And I usually answer, do nothing. Just do nothing. And we'll see if we can wiggle through there or not. And the whole time, there's people in their boats watching and thinking, wow, this is neat. Never thinking once that maybe we should get out of the way. Or maybe this is dangerous. Once you get through downtown Manistee, you get to look at this. Another bridge and another railroad bridge. We took the first saltwater tanker into Manistee in, I don't know, decades. And worked out great for us, but as you can see, that little tanker is still kind of tight for that little guy. But this is our view, this is the viewpoint that we get to look from the front window. Here's South Chicago. KCBX terminal on the right is no longer there. That's been removed. Chicago didn't want any contaminants on the ground anymore, so I don't know what will be there or is there now in the future. It might be houses, not sure. But once again, no industry. Steel mill's gone. Those big black covered piles there are salt. We hauled a lot of salt in there. Here's another view of what we see. This is on the Alpena going into Green Bay. The bridges always look cockeyed till you get in there. Hopefully there's not a Packers game going on. Hopefully it's not Friday night, people leaving the bars and someone trying to run and jump over the opening because they think they can make it. Milwaukee. Summerfest goes on in Milwaukee, and they have every light on down there that you can see. It's blaring at you, blinding you. Kind of hard to turn around when you can't see too much, but Milwaukee's open. We love Milwaukee. Nice, beautiful night. The old ore docks, Marquette. It's how you load every hatch. Used to be, people would be at the top of those chutes, and they would be hanging on to chains and ropes and using their foot to kick open a plate. So they'd swing out and kick. And that'd open a trap door and the iron ore came, whether you wanted it or not. Now it's all safety and regulated, and I believe there's hydraulic rams that control the flow. It's a whole lot more safe and conducive for the workers, especially in January, when it's all frozen up and nobody wants to be up there in a big storm, and I don't blame them. Here's some loading operations, unloading operations in Sheboygan. They haul gasoline, fuel oil, and for some reason, they mostly do this in the winter. I think it's different blend of product. Not too sure, but a lot of winter jobs we have. Back to good sunshiny days. Here is a saltwater vessel I'm on. So instead of swinging a boom out and unloading the ship with your conveyor belts, these have cranes. They scoop out what is ever in that cargo hold. So it could be coils of steel, it could be corn, it could be wheat, it could be bananas, it could be anything. Once in a while, we could take our family out. And good old Hannah dog, she got to go for a ride too to Green Bay. One of the most questions that I get asked is, tell us a story about when you were the most scared. And this is the most scary moment to me in my entire career. Probably not this day, but this spot. We were following another ship right through this track, and they stopped right under Mackinac Bridge. The wind shifted and they got stuck. I believe it was Philip R. Clark, Callaway, one of those boats. They were pretty good ice boats. But they were headed up, so we were going to follow them. And now Mackinac Island has an ice bridge, which they use to do snowmobiles and other motorized vehicles in the winter. And the wind picked up out of the north, and the ice bridge got broken, came off the island, came off the shore, and it clobbered us right in the beam of the Alpena. And it started pushing us right down to Major Shoal. Now this is at night. The Coast Guard says they don't do ice breaking operations at night. And when they say that, they mean that, because I called them in St. Ignace and asked, when can you get a cutter out here? Because now we are getting pushed on top of a shoal. And we had no control at that point. There was just too much ice. And they said they'd be out there at daylight. And I was thinking daylight's not going to work, because in about 3 hours they're going to have quite the mess. So I was helpless at this point, in my mind, because the ice was just taking us about 6/10 of a mile an hour right towards the shoal. Well, luckily the wind died down a bit or shifted, and we were able to back up and get some movement and free ourselves and turn around and get out of the trouble's way. And headed back behind Mackinac Island in open water, dropped the hook, and we waited for daylight and the Coast Guard cutter. So it wasn't the most dangerous looking scenario, but that was the most scared I've ever been, because I had no control of what was going on, and what was going on was something that was happening pretty bad in a fairly fast fashion in my eyes. This is the Alpena. This is 1942 equipment, updated to I don't know. Maybe 2,000 equipment. But my first week on board the ship as a third mate, we had none of these electronics. We had 2 radars and a Loran C, which kind of like a GPS. We're in Milwaukee. And we're getting our brand new Trio ECDIS, ECPINS electronic chart system. And so the vendor's on the dock, and he tells the captain, here's your unit. And the unit's so big it doesn't fit through the stairwells or any of the doors anywhere on the entire ship. So one week as a new third mate, young, foolish, the captain says, well, tie a rope to that, Jeff, and lug it up the air to the bridge wing and get it inside the pilot house. So in the rain, that's what we did with one of the most expensive pieces of equipment, probably $100,000. Here I am, a brand new kid on the lakes, tied a rope to a big cabinet of electronics and lug it up the side of the ship, and we carted it into the wheelhouse. Luckily, we had great crew. They knew their seamanship back then. I had great ABs and got the job done, and lo and behold, the thing actually worked when we turned it on. After that, no matter what that unit did, I told the captain that was the best unit around because I didn't want to lug another one up the side. So that trial worked out great. Here's passenger quarters on the Alpina. Used to be you could get a trip like the Tregurtha. The Alpina would offer those sometimes. Here's the old guest quarters. And there's beautiful Chicago with 4 barges in the way. So controlling a steamship, you have a brass handle right there. That's called your engine order telegraph, or we call it the chadburn. And it says, you know, forward, reverse, dead slow ahead, dead slow astern. And you ring that, you move that handle, somebody in the engine room has the same thing. They see the arrow go to what you want, they answer it, and they physically walk over the steam valves and they spin the steam valves to give you as much pressure as you want. It's not like a diesel engine with a gas pedal. It is manual control of the throttles. So in 2000, good old Y2K, I had good old 3 years of knowledge under my belt, and our office decided we had to come up with Y2K scenario where satellites were going to drop out of the sky and cars were going to crash and everything was going to be terrible. Well, we're on a steamship with no automation except for things that control a little bit of fuel and air to the boilers. And we have this equipment, which we have radars, they're not going to fail. And that brass handle, it's not going to fail. So we had to come up with a Y2K scenario. And after all the flim-flamming we did, we still ended up dropping the anchor, waiting for midnight. And lo and behold, everything was great. And I was talking to one of the mates a couple years ago, and I said, we were going over old stories about the history of sailing, you know, remember this, remember that. I was like, oh God, you remember Y2K and all the baloney we had to go through? And he looked at me and said, no, I was 6 years old. And I thought, oh, well, it's getting up there a little bit. The steering stand's been updated a little bit. So now we have electronic controls, autopilot, and a beautiful little girl. The old chart table, still do paper charts on the lakes. Most of these saltwater ships that come in, there's no paper charts. It's all electronics. Maybe they're a little more worried about Y2K, but for us, we're not too worried about that on the ships on the Great Lakes. Guest quarters on the Alpina, and the captain's office and the captain's room. A lot of old simple stuff still, 2 single small beds. There's an old tub, old sink, old carpeting that's still kind of nostalgic. It's not like the other ships I was on where it was kind of more like a college dorm room. Everything was made just bare bones. You were like a glorified dump truck back then. Here's what we look at now on electronics. That $60,000, $100,000 piece of equipment now comes in a $500 app on my iPad. This is Goderich, Canada. It gets a little busy sometimes. You wouldn't think it because it's a sleepy little town. But one ship has to move, the Algoma Innovator. They were loading salt. They had to get out of the way. Then the ship came out, turned around, and then there we were waiting to go in. Then the poor Algoma Innovator, he could go back to loading salt. So just to get in to load some grain, 3 ships had to do quite a bit of little finagling. But it always gets done. Now at the docks we go to, you need to know the soundings at each dock. And yeah, that might seem like no big deal, but for every trip, you need to know the soundings of where you're going to go throughout the entire trip, because the dock might not be your limiting factor. You know, the Detroit River, Livingston Channel could be the limiting factor. Maybe it's a rock cut in the St. Mary's River. Maybe it's the entrance to Saginaw Bay, not the channel in Saginaw Bay. So there's a lot of things you have to consider just trying to reach to one of those docks to play Ring Around the Rosie to get in and get a load of grain. Some docks are kind of close, and when you have crew that just paints the deck, it gets even closer, and you got to watch, make sure they don't walk on the wet paint, as stated there in the slide. This dock is in Alpena loading cement, and they had just done repairs to the concrete wall, and that's where we would turn around at. We'd stem up with the bow and ring the engine up and spin around and put pressure on the concrete while we turned around. Well, they told us you can't touch that for a couple weeks. So we had to come up with different ways to turn the ship around without touching the wall, without touching the concrete, and without ripping down all these rigs. And that's probably 1 to 2 feet right there. But we got it done. Sometimes you don't get it done. That's the steering pole. And that's what happens when you have a first mate that decides they know better than you, and you give them specific orders, do not touch the steering pole because it's rotten. And he decides to have the crew paint it. And those 3 guys were terrified to come wake me up and tell me what they did. But then I made them all pose. We got a good picture. And I don't know what we put up there. We put something up there.
What's a steering pole?
So you can see in the very front of the ship is a pole sticking out with the diamond on the end. That's what the wheelsman uses to see which direction the ship is pointed. So there's maybe a light or a tree or something you want them to steer on. That is the pointer that they use to put that ship on. It could be the Mackinac Bridge leg. It could be anything. It's not always just numbers and courses. They sometimes steer on the big bushy tree, or they steer on a milk crate here in the Saginaw River. The visitor center at the MacArthur Lock. This is what we see of you. One day, one of the mates comes up and has a flag. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he said, well, somebody in the stands wants to trade flags. And I said, okay, well, who is it? And they pointed out to a younger kid, I think, at the time. And so we dropped our flag down and I signed it and traded flags with them. Unloading cement. Cement is kind of like an oil product for pumping out. You handle it in the same way as oil product, I would have to say. You liquefy it with air, and you use compressors and pumps and pump it out those hoses. Cement is the glue that holds the concrete together. This is discharging with your typical conveyor belts that aren't broken, aren't frozen, and hauling stone, a lot of stone up here to this river. I loved coming up here because I knew there was a chance that I could see my family. Well, they could come and see me. A lot of times you couldn't get off the ship here because you didn't have enough time, but sometimes you got lucky and you could go home for a little bit. This dock is in Thunder Bay, Canada. It's on pilings, or what I could say are supposed to be pilings. They're, well, they're added to all the time, let's just say that. They're a little weak in some areas and really strong in others. This dock has 2 rigs that swing out, and they can load fertilizer or quite a few different products. But this is the approach that we use. And those tires are the bumpers, and if you hit this a little bit too hard, somebody could get thrown off the catwalk, and the catwalk could fall off into the water and hurt somebody pretty bad. Here's new controls on newer saltwater ships. No steam turbines, no steam valves, no brass, no nothing. The steering wheel is the black knob with right next to the silver knob at the far right of your screen. So it's got a red ring around it. That is what you use to steer the ship nowadays. In the top part of your screen, you'll see a real small toggle up there. It looks like it's part of the radar, but in automatic pilot, that's what you can use to turn the ship left or right 1 or 2 degrees. You just order your course with that little tiny toggle up there. And one day, I was reaching down and I was switching the toggle and nothing's really happening. And I was standing right by that telephone. Well, I was switching the toggle for the searchlight. And that's why the ship wasn't moving. I started laughing at myself, and the captain wondered what was going on. And then I told him what was going on, and yeah. These ships, very automated nowadays. The least amount of crew I've seen is 8, but most typical are about 12 to 17. So you'll have 8 guys trying to do the job, probably what 21 do around here. And so if you're out on the water boating, there's usually only 1 guy in this wheelhouse. Keep that in mind. There's not too many people looking around if you're out on the ocean. Their work schedules are a little bit different than we do on the Great Lakes, and their version of safety is a little bit different than ours. And as a pilot, I've seen this firsthand of how new automation isn't always that great for safety. This is the Alamis Board going into Green Bay. That was a fun one. The tugboat in the back, he had his buddy or somebody working on the tow line, and he didn't take enough wraps. So the tow line just pulled right off the tugboat halfway through our turn in the turning basin. And we have a bunch of Filipino guys just looking at me with wide eyes and wondering what to do. And so we had to tell them, start pulling the tow line up, get another line ready, and let's hook it back up to the tugboat. Cruise ships came in a few years ago. They are amazing. This is a Viking ship. They have top-notch service, top-notch crew, top-notch food, some amazing, capable, very powerful boats. That boat's bow thrusters have more power than the old steamer Alpina. That's just in the bow thrusters. Here's a view of the lounge. There's Mackinac Island in the background, Mackinac Bridge. This is their pilot house. The bottom left corner of the screen is a table, like this size, of all these tables. That is their computer unit for navigating. You don't need glasses for that. That was my favorite piece of equipment. No little iPad, just that giant table. This is Milwaukee Harbor back in the day. I took a picture of a picture hanging on the wall at a facility we were at, and the harbor was filled up with these boats. That's what our history was. These poor guys would get out there, I say poor guys, these guys would get out there at fit out whenever spring ice was good enough, and most of them would stay all year until the weather got too bad. Maybe they would take a vacation, maybe not. All these boats lined up, winter storage. Not much equipment, not much pilot house size, not much of anything, but a lot of heat in the summer, a lot of hot rooms, a lot of hard work. This is where we are now. This is going to be the future, but they've been saying that for 28 years because I heard it when I first came out. 12 crew on this. It's one of those old boats that was probably in that picture. No, that was a U.S. Steel. That was U.S. Steel harbor ships. They take an old ship, cut the stern off with the propulsion because it's too expensive to maintain, refit it, change it out, and put a tugboat up. Tugboats are more efficient for crew, more efficient for maintenance. That's just economics. That's just where everything's headed. Climbing up saltwater ship on a beautiful day. I wish every day was like that. I have several times a year, I'm soaking wet by the time I get to that top of that ladder. And you report to the wheelhouse, see where we're at, what's going on, take control from the next pilot, let him go down, warn him what it's like, and you're soaking wet in January. You deal with crew from all over the world, all different religions, all different ethnicities, and I hadn't seen a young white guy in years. And when I walked up to the wheelhouse and saw this, I thought I was seeing a ghost. So I wanted to make sure these guys also saw the young white kid, and I don't know how he got on there, to be honest. He was in Canada, and the cadet time he was allotted to do was on this ship, and it's usually Indians top to bottom. But this poor kid, he was learning how to eat curry, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't know. I don't know if he made it. He had a wild look to his eyes. You form bonds with your crews that you work with as a pilot. This is a captain of a cruise ship. I'm not sure, Victory 1 or Victory 2. Very nice guy. And they trust you. They know who you are. They look forward to seeing you again. And they know they can go to bed at night and just deal with their passengers instead of worrying about, is their ship going to run aground in the Northwest Channel? Then you got this every 2 weeks. This is what you deal with. You walk aboard, everything's good, Mr. Pilot. And then you say, well, what's going on over my shoulder? It doesn't look like everything's good. There's always something wrong somewhere. You just got to figure out what's broken and is it going to affect the handling of the ship. And there's something always broken. If they're talking fast and loud, something's broken. These ships move a lot of water. Keep that in mind. I've had young kayakers come right up and touch the hulls. Thank God they were, college age, good-looking kids. They paddled away, but that's not the normal. Please stay away. They can sneak up on you, that's correct. Here's the Alpena before it was the Alpena. Leon Fraser, they cut out, I believe, 120 feet right out of the middle and turned it into the Alpena to haul cement. 1991, I believe, it was ready. Okay, when you think you're having a bad day, you can be lucky you're not a Ukraine captain walking out to his car and seeing an unexploded mortar device sitting in the wheel of his car. So if you think it's rough out today and you know it's just life's a struggle, you could wake up to that and count yourself lucky you're not dealing with the real world situations that the people in Ukraine are right now. These guys have their rifles right by their entry door, and their kids are going out and using those rifles. And I've seen some terrible, terrible photos of the reality over there. Very, very terrible stuff. So if you think you got it bad one day, remember this picture. It could be worse. That's all I got for you. Thank you. We're going to take a short break. And any questions you have on any of these slides, come on up to me and we'll try to address them after the break. Okay, just a few questions. One was weather limitations. What limitations do you take into account for the port you're going into? Well, it depends on your tugboats. It depends on what direction the wind is. It depends on how long it's been blowing. If it's blowing 25 knots, you're going to have your hands full. If it's blowing 30 knots, you probably shouldn't do that. If you have good tugboats like you have in Thunder Bay, 2 family-owned businesses, they know what they're doing. They can get you out of trouble or keep you from getting into trouble if you're on the ball. You can go in with quite a bit of weather. But as far as going out on the lake, boy, when gales are forecast, not too many ships nowadays go out on the lake with gales. Steel's getting old, things are cracking, it leads to damage which causes time and more welding and more Coast Guard inspections. And so if there's gales out, most ships don't really go unless it's going to be favorable conditions. And 17-foot waves, that's going to be about the max anybody is going to want to be out in, and it's not going to be a fun ride. You know, you can bang into 12-foot waves, no problem. The cook's going to be upset, the lettuce is going to get spilled, but that's about it. I mean, I don't know what else I can say about weather limitations. It's just dependent on where you're going. Like if you got a big 20-foot sea over the stern and you're on a big ship, I've been on saltwater ships where it was blowing like crazy and I thought, oh boy, here we go. And it rode just fine. I mean, they're used to going across the oceans. What would you like me to expand on? Anything more about weather limitations?
Have you ever navigated the Cuyahoga River?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the question was, have I ever navigated the Cuyahoga River? Yep. Yeah, I had some real long nights in that river. I probably would have more hair and less gray hair. At the end of the year, we got the beautiful schedule of running salt shuttles from Cargill Salt in the old riverbed of the Cuyahoga all the way up to Independence Dock or somewhere all the way up the river. And this is the old Maumee. Now I was told the old Maumee was a Corvette by the captain when I walked aboard. And I said, well, how good is this steel? Because it doesn't look very good. Oh, it's good old steel. Well, the Maumee was not a Corvette. Not even close. And you go up the Cuyahoga River with a load of salt on left-hand turns, you had to go slow, and you had to go even slower, and it was awful tiring. Or you could go fast and you could be terrified and not make some turns. But yeah, we did salt shuttles up the Cuyahoga River, and
We got this was actually an 8-track tape to community sailing from the Freighters Association, and it showed freighters going up the Cuyahoga and all the pleasure boats that are rafted out and they're just getting crushed because they're not supposed to be there. And it also showed people going in pleasure boats in between freighters going opposite ways and going between.
yeah, as far as,
You've seen crap like that, I imagine.
yeah, I've never crushed any boat. I've seen a few done. I have had an incident with the rowing club. You know, they have some fancy rowing setup where there's 8 people in a big, long, skinny kayak, and they let, I don't want to say old people in it at night to try their hand, but yeah, they let old people in, and we're going up the Cuyahoga River, and here they come. And the guy's following him in his little pontoon boat, trying to get him out of the way, and everybody's just standing there looking at us, enjoying the scene. Well, I hit the bow thruster, and that shot some water over towards these old duffers, and in the bow of their little kayak got wedged into the dock, and I'm sure that thing was expensive. And that turned that thing sideways. It looked like a sideways canoe on the very tip. And they all just kept looking at me waving, you know. Nobody got injured, nobody got hurt. The college suffered some money, and I think statute of limitations is up on that. So please don't give me a phone call.
Question. How far do you go up the Cuyahoga River?
You go all the way up till there is no more.
And that is how far would you say?
Ooh. Well, that's a 2-hour trip or a 3-hour trip. Or some days it's an 8-hour trip. Yep. One question I had was about scheduling. How do you know where you're going? Well, the office tries to have a weekly schedule. They try for a monthly schedule. That's impossible. But they send a schedule out for about a week. And then the wind picks up and you know you can't go somewhere. And the first question they always ask is, where can you go? So you have to be ready to know where you can go and what the weather's going to be there. So you know about a week ahead of time, sometimes 2 weeks, if it's summertime, if the cargo's there, if everything lines up. But that's not too far. That's usually impossible. Stone docks, everybody's racing to get to the dock. If somebody beats you, they got the cargo. If you're booked at iron ore docks, sometimes there's some demurrage. It's all contracts, but if somebody beats you to the stone dock, you got to find somewhere else to go and let them know, hey, here's what's going on, here's where we can go, here's where we can't. So scheduling, no, it's not long term. And then if it is long term, you're going to blow an engine. So you'll run around on one of these boats on one engine, limping along, going up the Cuyahoga River on one engine, watching out for those people rowing their boats, and going wherever you can, wherever the schedule, you know, allows a real slow boat to go. And on one engine, some of these boats have 2 engines. Calumet, Manitowoc, 2 engines, Maumee 1. I blew engines on both of those. We had some not perfect equipment. I don't want to say cheap equipment. Not perfect equipment. The engines were blowing every year. Every year we'd be running around, limping around, going slow on one engine. One engine doesn't take home a whole lot of fuel. So we were 3 weeks between groceries. And the damn cook was always running out of lettuce, and my beautiful wife would bring cases of lettuce and cases of French fries and milk so they could have their fresh produce. But on one engine, very fuel efficient, a lot slower. But time is money on these boats. If you can pick up 20 hours, you got another cargo. Another cargo, that's a lot of money. So schedule, 1 week. That's about it. Any other questions?
What if the river, the wind's blowing out of the southwest, you're coming into the Saginaw River and the river's down 4 feet? What does that do? I mean, and you know it ahead of time, so you can only load X amount on the ship because it'll have too much draft if you load it.
Well, if
Per foot, what does that cost? I mean, in percentage wise.
Well, if a foot is huge. So the Saginaw River, if it's down 4 feet, you're going to find another place to go. You're not going to load that cargo. You have to think 5 days in advance before. You know, Stoneport to Saginaw entrance, 10 hour, it depends on what boat you're on, but 10-hour transit. So if you know that's coming, or if you know super flooding rains are coming, hey, we can't go there, we shouldn't go there, and they'll find a different port for you. But if you know south wind's coming, it's gonna probably go down about 10 inches. You load 10 inches lighter, and you go for it. If the water level drops 12 inches, if it drops 14, you just wait for a little while. But most times it works out. Hell, most times in Saginaw River, you're on the bottom anyway.
Well, they just finished dredging this week.
Yeah, this week is finished dredging. Next week, it'll be shoaled up. Believe me, I see the stuff going down in front of our house in Sanford River.
So some of the boats have the pilot house in the front, some are in the back. How does that maneuver, one way or the other? Which one do you prefer?
Okay, pilot house in the front versus pilot house in the back. They maneuver the same. It's your perspective of watching what's going on. And when you're in the back, you pay attention to, your line of sight and what's closing where. When the pilot house is in the front, you're kind of looking backwards a little bit to see the sway, see what's going on. But they pretty much handle the same. It's just your perception of what's going on and how you deal with it. My favorite, what I prefer, any of those that run and any of those that have a good cook.
Over here.
What's the biggest ship you've been on?
Amazing down 6 though.
The biggest ship I've been on, well, the Great Lakes are limited by the Welland Canal and the St. Lawrence Seaway. So 740 is about as big as the ships for saltwater ships that come in. Most of them are, under 700 feet for saltwater ships. But the 1,000-foot ships around here, I've never been on. I haven't worked on. That's kind of a niche for certain companies. I haven't worked for those companies. So I guess the answer for the biggest ship is around 700 feet. I had a question of what's it take to do what you're doing and get to where you are? Well, you got to be a good citizen, number one. That's true in almost any aspect of life, in my opinion, but if you're not a good citizen, you can't go to Canada. And Canada goes hand in hand for cargo operations. So if you're a good citizen, if you're hardworking, if you pull your pants up, you can work on these ships with very little education, very little training. There's good pay, and if you're a hardworking kid, hey, go for it. Do some research. You can get on. Any more questions?
Yeah, I got a question. Maybe you mentioned it, I don't think you did. How did you first start out?
How did I first start out? 1994, graduated high school, and my parents had a brochure at home for the Great Lakes Maritime Academy in Traverse City. And it said 100% job placement, big retirement coming up, which is what they've said every year for the last 30 years that I know of, and probably before. But it was okay pay and 100% job placement. And the school, it only cost $8,000 a year with food and board for 3 years. So for $25,000, you could do this. And I read the brochure, and I was thinking of going into law enforcement. We grew up with three police officers on our street, and I looked up to all of them. One of them was like father to me. And so I was going to go into law enforcement, but the pay there wasn't so great. You were probably going to get a job somewhere else. So found the brochure. Well, looks good to me. Not working in a big factory or inside windows in a big office. So that's where I went. That's not the case now. Great Lakes Maritime Academy is not that cheap anymore.
Question. Average, how many gallons of fuel does the ship hold?
Ship holds 110,000 gallons of fuel. You need to know how much fuel you have on board in case you have a hole. The Coast Guard, the office, your salvage equipment, everything needs to be, how much do you have on board, how much could spill, how much absorbent material do we got to bring. So every day we're taking fuel, soundings, samples, making sure everything's good. Go ahead.
Were you ever caught in a nor'easter?
Caught in a nor'easter. I've never been caught in anything.
Okay.
I've stuck my nose in a few things, but I wasn't caught. You know, that was my choice. And we've never really suffered damage from any storms I've been in. But we always made it through just fine and got to where we were going, and everything was good. I've had a few crew members say, look, that ship's at anchor, that ship's at anchor, that ship's at anchor. And I said, well, the wind is going to switch. It's not going to get time to build big seas in any one direction. We're going. Oh boy, I better call home. Well, you better, but don't do it up here. So no, never been caught in anything. In the weather system forecast and the computer animated models you have now is so detailed. It's great. Used to be I'd listen on the radio, write down the Mayflower, you know, a bunch of codes, letters, numbers, and that was your weather. And now you can go by, you know, this 3-hour window, I can make it into Port Inland, or I can make it into Grand Haven. So thank you, NOAA Weather, for getting digital graphics. One electronic thing that I like is that weather forecast system.
When you're switching from a food product to, say, gravel or coal, how do you prepare the hold for that switch?
Switching cargoes, especially to a food grade product. Every cargo hold always gets rinsed out. On some of the ships I was on, we had great mates that enforced cargo cleanliness 100%. If you switch from coal to anything, and you're unloading that cargo here at Sergeant's Dock, and here comes a big chunk of coal on a DOT grade highway project pile of stone. Well, they can call that cargo contamination, and we just did all that work to haul all that stone, and now we get to own that cargo. So never once did any of my crew buy a cargo. They always worked hard, they always did everything good, and there was always double checks. So what goes into that? Rinsing cargo holds with a hose. Either they're physically down there with fire hoses, washing every little bit of cargo. Then the first mate goes down there, runs the chains, he's like a monkey, going through with a screwdriver and knocking off any bit of leftover residue cargo, and then that gets flushed out. So switching to a food grade product, you have to seal the gates up usually, grease some stuff up, put special sealant along the hatch covers so no moisture can get in. I remember first day on the Calumet there, it was laid up in the Welland Canal, showed up. They had a cargo of grain, of corn, and they unloaded throughout the winter with a few mishaps, but they did it. In the corn, I noticed up in the steel superstructure way up high, it was all growing. It was 6 inches tall. So all cargoes are always washed out. Now if you're going iron ore, iron ore, iron ore, some people will say, yeah, well, we don't wash out hardly at all. Well, that's their trade, but I wasn't on that trade.
Could you tell us a little bit about being a pilot on some of the salties, or any, what's your purpose there for that?
What's the purpose of the pilot on some of the salties? Well, my purpose for being there is protecting each and every one of you and our ecosystem right here. This is my backyard. They don't treat their backyard in India like we treat our backyard. I'm here to protect the environment. I'm here to protect the lives of the people in the boats. I'm there to protect our rules and regulations. So secondary to that, we're there to advise the captain on safe navigation practices, which routes they expect to take, go over their voyage plan. In confined waters, drive the ship, handle the ship, go through the sulaks. We're driving the ship, handling the ship. Out on the lake, he's got crew watching, doing their thing, but you're always making sure they're not discharging oil or something over the side. So I'm not saying we're policemen, and we're not going to call the cops and call the Coast Guard unless there's a major infraction, but we're telling them, hey, shut it down. So number one role as a pilot is protecting our backyard and protecting each and one of you.
So you're a pilot the minute it gets into like the US or something, all the way till they're done, the whole time?
There are pilots all around the world. In the United States is no different than most other countries. As soon as a foreign ship or any ship enters US waters, they take on a pilot for that territory. And obviously one guy can't do the whole thing, so there's certain districts, divisions of pilotage duties. As soon as that ship leaves the United States near coast waters, territories, their division area, the pilot gets off and away they go.
Yeah, do you need a passport to enter different countries with a ship?
Do you need a passport to enter different countries with a ship? Yes, you do. Yeah. One trip on the old Maumee, now the old Calumet, my bosun, I allowed him to bring his wife, I hope at the time. Our trips changed, our schedule, as schedules do, because they never last for more than a week. We went to Canada. We get back, and luckily it was it was a trip to one of the officers I knew from 20 years. And she was crying and freaking out because she didn't have a passport coming back from Canada. On a ship, you need that. So I went down and talked to him, told him the scenario. He was good with everything, did a squared, checked her ID, did his job, did his due diligence. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but yes, you do.
Can you name either the entry or the exit, piloting, most exciting and maybe scary? Did that work?
The most exciting or scary while piloting?
Maybe unusual?
Well, every day something's unusual on these foreign ships, I tell you that. Usually what you're looking at on your dinner plate is unusual. The scariest thing is silence, you know. When silence occurs, that means something turned off, and that's usually the engine. So depending where you are and what you can do and how much time you have to deal with it, Yeah, the scariest thing is silence. Crew injuries, that's a terrible one. Luckily as a pilot, I don't have to deal with broken arms and split open heads anymore. As a captain, I was down there hosing out guys' split noggins when they fell down in the cargo hold because their safety chain didn't work. They had two, you know, we had two, but anyway, as a pilot, you don't have to deal with the injuries. You just say, oh man, that looks bad, go see the captain.
How do you get your assignments as where you're going to pilot?
Well, we have a rotation, and it's a list. Who's on the roll? And your name comes up in that area, there you go. And, you know, sometimes it's not where you're at. Sometimes you have to hop in a car and drive to Duluth. And then, oh, guess what? They cancel. Now hop in a car and go to Chicago. Well, guess what? They cancel. Go to Milwaukee, you know.
How did you view the Saginaw River as far as degree of difficulty? Was it the lower end or the higher end to navigate?
How did I view the Saginaw River in difficulty? I love the Saginaw River. If there was one place that you could get into, if the water level was there, it was the Saginaw River. I mean, you didn't tie up to any docks. Lafarge, Wholesome, S-Rock has, I think, one of the few good docks you tie up to. It's always a riverbank you're laying against, so you could pretty much get into Saginaw with anything. Within reason. Within reason. Now, you'll learn tricks in the Saginaw River by paying attention to other people's mistakes or making them yourself, and you know where to slow down, where to start turning quick. Sheboygan Creek is a good catch point. You know, if you don't come around that turn very quick, you're going to be stuck there for a while. So as far as difficulty, I didn't think the Saginaw River was all that bad. Now, when you get flooding rain and it's hard to turn around, that's a whole different story. You try to avoid the area. The cargoes that come in here are mostly aggregate. And aggregates aren't the best paying for the shipping companies. You know, the stone is relatively cheap compared to iron ore or a coal product. So to sit and wait for weather for a stone cargo isn't cost effective. So if you just go, well, that's where the office told me to go, I'm going to go for it, you're going to sit and waste money and you're not going to be very productive. So you take that stuff into account. But I didn't think the Saginaw River was very difficult for lake vessels that come up here. Now, a big saltwater ship, that's a whole different story. If they want one of those to go all the way up the river, I would say I'm glad I'm retired.
Do most of the rivers on the Great Lakes go up and down like the Saginaw River with the wind?
Most rivers do. Yes. In my first few years, we put up water gauges, water boards at the docks we went to. And I don't think it was well known to me or some of the guys I was around how much that water fluctuated, because we would take our drafts every hour, survey the boat, see where we're at, cargo operations, go on the dock, read the water gauge. All right, it's plus 12. Next hour, it's plus 18. Oh, it moved 6 inches. Yeah. I've watched Green Bay move 18 inches in 20 minutes. Yep. They all cycle. They all have their motion. It depends on the wind. It depends on what low pressure is going through. I've been in some horrific current down in the Calumet River in South Chicago. I'd never seen something like that. I had the Alpena full steam ahead, just barely going through the bridge. And yeah.
How long does it take to unload a cement ship?
How long does it take to unload a cement ship? Usually 1 day. You can load that in about 5 hours and you can unload it in 1 day.
How do you learn different rivers, you know?
Do they just send you, learn that river?
How do you learn different rivers? Well, hopefully by experience from another captain. I was fortunate enough to start my career when some other knowledgeable guys were ending theirs, and I watched what they did, I listened to what they did, and they said, look out for this over here, and if you don't pay attention to that, you'll learn the hard way. So if you're not watching what other people are doing and listening, and then ask them, hey, how'd that go? You're gonna be one of those guys that gets stuck sideways in the Saginaw River. So it's mostly self-taught, self-educated, but these companies will put you with another captain and give you training, captain training, and you know, they give you time to learn how to do stuff, where to go. Them on me there, my first year as captain on that, I was going to docks and ports I never saw. It got to the point where I would tell the dock boss who was placing the cargo, hey, put your left blinker on your pickup truck so I know where to go. And that's what he did, and that's what it worked, and we all figured it out. But my crew was all under the age of 25, all of them. Yep. But that's the only kids that could run that. You had to move those cables every different dock. I mean, God, if I had to do that now, oh. No way. So there is training. Companies give you ride-alongs. They give you time to develop. But you have to take the initiative to do it yourself.
How much trips do you make in 1 year?
How many trips do I make in 1 year? As a captain, we would do about 100 trips.
How often or who inspects the ships, the hulls?
The Coast Guard inspects the hulls, a big inspection every 5 years, maybe 6 years if you get an extension. But every year before you take one of these ships out of winter storage, Coast Guard comes and does a thorough inspection. They check all your safety equipment. They make sure your crew is going to be safe and everything is working properly. Nobody's going to get hurt from faulty equipment. Every spring, every year. And then 5 years, they have a real in-depth inspection.
You don't have to go in a dry dock for that every 5 years.
You do.
Are they checking the welds and the hull, all that kind of stuff?
They check everything, yep. Yep. And if somebody calls in and says a report, if you have a fractured weld somewhere, they can just come out and look. And hey, there's a fractured weld behind the washing machine. All right, let's get it taken care of, you know. Yeah, not at night. Okay, well, I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope you support this organization, and thank you for coming, and drive safe going home.